In this video, we will show you how to replace your front strut assembly on this Toyota Sienna. This will be located inside of your front wheel well. Let's get into it. Okay friend, let's get started on our job. The first thing we want to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground so we can remove the wheel. To remove the wheel, we'll remove all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts. With the wheel out of the way, we have a clear view of our front strut. Let's start removing the upper mounting point holding the sway bar link to the front strut. If you were to look in the center here, you're going to find an area that you can use an Allen head socket. Typically this is rusted and will strip out. If that's the case, go ahead and use some locking pliers along the back side here. Be careful not to cause any damage while we put this on. To remove the nut, you'll be using a 17mm. Now let's pay attention along the other side of the strut. We're going to remove this 12mm headed bolt that holds our ABS wire and brake flex hose in place. When you do remove this, you need to be extremely careful not to cause any damage to either of these pieces. There's the flex hose. That looks good. ABS wire, we'll just slide it right out of there. Looks good as well. Follow the ABS wire. You're going to find a plastic bracket that goes around the front strut and the knuckle. It's pretty simple to dislodge it. It just has 2 locking ears. Just give it a little tug. It should slide right off of there. Next, it's good habit to go ahead and remove your 30mm 12-point axle nut and break the axle free from the wheel bearing. So when you go ahead and remove the mounting bolts that hold the steering knuckle to that strut, if this was to pull away, you don't put a tug on your axle, causing damage, in which case you'd have to replace it. We'll use a hammer and punch in the center here. We don't want to cause any damage to that axle. Once you do have movement there, we'll move up and along the back side here and remove the 2 pieces of mounting hardware holding the knuckle to the strut. When removing these, we're going to fully remove the mounting nut from the top one, but leave the bolt in place while we remove the other mounting bolt. To remove these, we'll be using a 22mm on each side. Just make sure that can move. As you go to remove these, you may find that you have to wiggle things around. Thoroughly inspect the mounting hardware. If it looks like it's rotted and weak, you need to go ahead and replace it. As we start pulling this away, once again, you want to be extremely careful not to cause any damage to that axle. Let's pause in this area and make our way up inside the engine compartment. Now up inside the engine compartment, we're going to start removing our wiper arms. Before you remove the wiper arms, use some blue masking tape and come right along the top of the wiper blade directly on the windshield. When we remove the wiper blades and arms, we want to make sure we put them back in the original position. Now we can remove those wiper arms. The process for one is the same for either. For each of them, you're going to find you have a plastic cover. Go ahead and remove that plastic cover using a small prying device. Under that, you'll find a 14mm headed mounting nut. We'll remove the nut. Once you do have that off, you're going to have to shake the wiper arm up and down a little bit to break it free from the shaft area. Once you do so, you can lift it up and off, but be careful for pinch points and definitely don't let it hit up against your windshield, which could cause damage. There we are. Same process for the passenger side. When removing the arms, you're going to find that the passenger side wiper arm has a different curve than the driver's side. You don't want to mix them up. Continuing with a plastic trim tool, we're going to separate the edge of the molding here. Now for this, you're going to find that you have a hooked area that slides in right here, but to separate that, we'll move up closer to the windshield. In this area, you just want to gently start prying those two apart. After that, you should be able to lift this and pull it up and away. With this side completely dislodged, go over and do the exact same thing on the opposite side of the vehicle. The next thing we have to do is look underneath this area. There's going to be several locking clips. What we need to do is be able to lift this up. What I found on this particular vehicle is several of them are already broken, so this can generally just move around. But typically you just make your way under to each one of the locking clips, gently squeeze on it, and you should be able to lift this up and out of place. You can use a small trim tool if you need to help lift it up. Now while holding this up, we're going to have to start sliding it forward, away from the windshield. When doing the driver's side front strut, you're going to have to remove the wiper, transmission, and motor from this area. If you're doing the passenger side, the mounting hardware will be fully exposed and you don't have to worry about doing this, but typically when you do struts, you do them as a pair. To remove the wiper, transmission, and motor and get this out of the way, we're going to make our way to our 3 pieces of mounting hardware. There's one 10mm bolt here, one located just forward from it, and the other one's all the way on the other side of the wiper transmission. Flex this out of the way. With all the mounting hardware off of this, you're going to take hold of the wiper transmission, give it a slight tug towards the driver's side, and then push it away. After that, you should be able to slide it away enough that you can gain access to the mounting hardware. Careful for that windshield. With that out of the way, we can see each of our 3 pieces of 14mm headed mounting hardware. One of them's a little bit harder to see and gain access to. We're going to remove this wiring harness, just essentially dislocating it. Under this area, there's some locking tabs. It's pretty easy to just push on them with your finger. You should be able to lift this up and out of place. That exposes all 3 of our 14mm headed mounting nuts. We'll start removing those. On the last one, you want to make sure you're holding onto the strut. For the inboard one, be extremely careful around your windshield. Just leave this on a couple threads here. Let's make sure we're holding onto the strut while we continue. Get that off of there. Let's remove the strut from the vehicle. Okay, let's get ready to install our brand new front strut assembly. Let's carefully get this inside the fender well and lined up. While holding it there, we'll continue on with our 3 mounting nuts up along the top. Snug them up. Now that we have the nuts on the top here started on and snugged up, we're going to pause before torquing them. We can continue on inside the wheel well. You're going to have to put everything together there and install each of the wheels. Once we've done that, we can make our way back up top to torque each one of these mounting nuts with the full weight of the vehicle on the ground. Now we'll make our way down in the wheel well, align the knuckle with the lower portion of the strut. We've got our bolts. Those come through from the front towards the rear. There we are. Let's get the next one in there. Typically, it's a good idea to use some thread locker on these. Start them on, snug them up, torque those to 184 foot-pounds. Let's get this on here. Just spread those two ears, slide them in until you hear a nice click. Give it a little tug, make sure that's secure. We'll follow it along the front side now, starting with the ABS wire. For the ABS wire, you do have a locating tab, which will slide into its mounting port there. Go ahead and swing it over and align your mounting bolt hole. Continue on with your flex hose bracket. That goes right over the top of the two. At this point, we want to put the bolt through the flex hose, through the ABS wire, directly into that strut. Double check to make sure those are completely secured. Now let's align the upper portion of our sway bar link. We're going to pivot this over. Press that in. At this point, we'll start on the mounting nut. Snug it up, torque that to 55 foot-pounds. We'll make sure we're holding onto the back side here with some locking pliers. Being careful for our boot, of course. Make sure your sway bar link's completely secured. Let's install our axle nut. When installing this, you never want to use an impact tool. You could cause damage to your bearing. We'll just do this by hand. To torque the axle nut, we're going to bring this closer to the ground. Use a long pry bar and carefully come across your lug studs. Now we can torque this to 217 foot-pounds. The next thing you need to do is pay attention to the slot on your axle. We'll use a hammer and punch and gently drive this in, locking the axle nut in so there's no way it can loosen up on you while you're driving down the road. Now it's time to reinstall the wheel. Start on all 5 of your 21mm lug nuts and bottom them out. After that, we'll get the wheel down on the ground and you can torque each of these to 76 foot-pounds. Now that the wheel's back on the ground, we'll be torquing these to 76 in a crisscross manner. Torqued. Now that we finished torquing this wheel, make your way back up in the engine compartment. You're going to torque the upper strut nuts to the manufacturer's spec, and then after that, make your way over to the passenger side, repeat the process. Once you confirmed everything is tight up here, we're going to continue on to resecuring this wiring harness into its proper positioning. Press that right down in there. Listen for a click, ensure that it's properly secured. Now it's time for that wiper transmission. We'll be paying attention in the center. We have this rubber grommet, which will slide into this area. Once you do have it aligned, we're going to continue on with the mounting bolts. You want to get those lined up as well. Let's get the mounting hardware in here. You want to start in each of the pieces of mounting hardware before you tighten any of them. Double check to make sure that's completely secured in the proper placement. When installing the wiper cowl, pay attention along where the windshield will sit. You're going to have several tabs that make their way across, sandwiching the windshield in place. Start bringing this in here. As we slide it in, we want to be paying attention to these to make sure they are in the upright position, not down and under. There we are. Now we're paying attention as this makes its way across the windshield, as I mentioned. To get it properly aligned. Double check to make sure the seal is seated properly and not folded under. Now it's time to insert each one of the corner pieces. We're going to start with the forward corner. Just go ahead and slide that in, then lock it in with the rearward area here. That should just press right in, holding it in place. Once you have this one in, move over and do the same thing on the opposite side of the windshield cowl. Once each side is locked in, we're going to make our way across the front and press in each of our locks. Double check to make sure it's completely secured as well. Now it's time for the wiper arms. As I mentioned, when you had removed them, you want to make sure that you have the passenger side arm on the passenger side during the installation. We also need to make sure that we have the wiper blade aligned with our markings that we made on the windshield. If you put the wiper arm too high, when you turn on the wiper blades, this could potentially come up and cause damage to your vehicle. Press that on. Double check our marking here. Start that nut on there, snug it up. When tightening this, you may find that the wiper arm wants to lift up on you. Let's just go ahead and hold that still while we continue. Once that's bottomed out, just go ahead and make sure it's nice and snug by taking it a little bit further. We'll give it a wiggle, reinstall your protective cover. Same process for the driver's side wiper arm. Let's get this aligned. Once again, we're paying attention to our markings here. Right there's bottomed out. Let's get this cover on there. Okay, friend, we finished installing our strut. At this point, you want to go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test down to your local alignment shop. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.